Exploring the intricacies of Virginia's road to adult use, this is Season 1 of the Cannabis Capital Show with John Lunsford, brought to you by Golden Piedmont Labs.
Welcome to Cannabis Capital with John Lunsford, the program that focuses on the opportunities and pitfalls of investing in cannabis. I'm John Lunsford, an investment banker with Young America Capital, and I'm excited to have with us our co-host, Steve Mize, president of Golden Piedmont Labs. Each season focuses on a different topic. Season 1, The Road to Adult Use in Virginia, focuses on the hot-button issues that Virginia lawmakers are dealing with as they prepare to make the rules for the slated 2024 rollout. We do this by having Steve, a serially successful entrepreneur and investor from Virginia, and also the president of a hemp processor based in Virginia, conduct a series of conversations with top industry operators and investors to find out what has and hasn't worked in other states. Golden Piedmont's based in South Boston. This show is a culmination of conversations that we've been having for nearly a year. Steve, can you tell us a little bit about how you got here?
Yes, thanks so much, John. So I grew up in Southside Virginia and have been in lots of different businesses and having sold some medical companies. There were several of us decided to try to give back to this community, and we were going to do that because it's primarily an agricultural area, trying to look at the new opportunities, and hemp was one of those. We've been doing this for a couple of years, and in addition to setting up accounting and finance and things, I've been in the back turning buttons and deciding how much ethanol we use. So it's been an interesting opportunity. So the next thing that we're looking at is in Virginia last year, they made it legal to grow, legal to sell, legal to grow and legal to have, but not legal to sell. So we're trying to work our way through what we need to do to make the Virginia laws such that we don't make the mistakes that other people have made in the past. So John and I were talking about this and figured out the best way to do this was to talk to some other people that have been through it in other states. And that brings us to Jake, that is going to explain a little bit about this from an agricultural standpoint. So we look forward to hearing from Jake and asking a few questions.
Well, terrific. Thanks, Stephen. And Steve, Jake, welcome. Glad to have you here. For everybody who doesn't know Jake, Jake's the CEO of SunMed Growers, the largest cultivator in Maryland with over 700,000 square feet of indoor cultivation space, which I've had the pleasure of having toured myself. He's also a significant processor in the state of Maryland. And it's very timely to have Jake because on the November ballot in Maryland, there's something called Question 4, which Jake is going to tell us about. But before he gets into that and he and Steve talk about the issues involved, Jake, could you tell us a little bit about your story of how you ended up in this business? Because your family has been in the horticultural business for a long time, but cannabis is new. And your experience is, I think, super relevant to what we're discussing today.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Steve. Let me correct the record real quick. SunMed Growers has about 400,000 square foot of cultivation space. The 700,000 square foot is my other business, Tidal Creek Growers, here in Maryland, where we grow petunias, marigolds, and geraniums for independent garden centers and landscapers. And that is where I started in Maryland with my horticultural world. My story is my grandfather immigrated here from Holland back in the 40s after World War II. And he had 16 children, and he, throughout his lifetime, started and developed numerous agricultural businesses, and he kind of got a lot of my uncles and aunts into the agricultural business, specifically in greenhouses, growing food, growing ornamental bedding plants, growing lettuce, growing orchids. And so my entire extended family is in the agricultural business, in the greenhouse business, and that's there's a dozen different businesses right now in the United States, all owned by either my uncles or first cousins. And combined, they represent about 26 million square foot of heated greenhouse space all over the country. And we're one of the largest families in that industry. So my start in the bedding plant world, here in Maryland was in 2001 when I started my own company with my wife and small children, and that is Tuttle Creek Growers, and that also grows bedding plants for sale to independent garden centers. So got my start in the cannabis world here in Maryland. Maryland in 2015-16 timeline was coming up with their medical program, and I was watching that, and we ended up applying for a growing license and earned a 6th place spot in that competitive application round back in 2016. And I got interested in cannabis because I had a brother out in Colorado who had started in the industry. And when I would go out there for family vacations and get-togethers, I would, be very interested in what he was doing out there in Colorado, and thought, well, I can do it as well. So that was the beginning of my, foray into the cannabis industry. And what we've done is try to take an agricultural perspective from it, and we built a fairly efficient, very high-end greenhouse here in Cecil County, Maryland.
And it's terrific products, and we're going to have some video and other assets where viewers can go see a little bit more about SunMed Growers. Steve, why don't you take it from here? Jake has had a lot of experience, so we're looking forward to hearing his 2 cents, and then maybe some advice for us. So take it away, Steve.
Thanks so much, Jake. The shows that we're going to be doing, we're going to concentrate on different parts of the industry. Obviously, with you, it's the agricultural part, and also how you got your license for your grow facilities. So if you can kind of start out telling us about going through the licensure process to be able to grow in Maryland. I think that's a big part of what we're interested in.
Sure. So what Maryland did back in 2016 is come up with a very, very complex application process. If I remember right, there were 145 essay questions that we had to answer over 8 or 10 different subjects, everything from growing, obviously, to security, to sales, to process, to employee, issues. And we had to answer, in my application, I had to answer each question in a certain word, 50 words here, 100 words here, 1,000 words here, 5,000 words here. And that process was very laborious. I locked myself in my office for 30 days to write that application because, they released it and then wanted it submitted within 30 days. And when that application was also, they wanted all information redacted. So it was colorblind, face blind, everything was blind. And the idea, I thought, was, the way they designed it was to prevent any sort of favoritism in the application review process. And then there was 148 people that applied, for 15 grower licenses. And I actually thought there's not a chance I was going to win. I wasn't politically connected. I didn't have any, I wasn't a big MSO with a whole lot of money and a whole lot of, consultants. But we ended up being successful on that front end there. So, but, Maryland's that front end here in Maryland was that first round of applications was fraught with controversy because unfortunately no African Americans won that original round, and there were some last minute substitutions that happened for geographical diversity, and they did not take into account racial diversity because it was a colorblind application, and it caused a lot of turmoil in those first couple years here in the marketplace. And so what ended up happening was there were a lot of lawsuits associated, with the selection process, and we had to, navigate our way through that. And what ended up happening was a political compromise, and they basically gave out 7 more licenses above the 15 in a second round. And that second round, then they, it was not colorblind. They gave extra points for minorities, and that had an intended result in selecting, almost half a dozen minority applicants that now have a chance to participate. And it was the right thing to do. And I was very front and center in that process.
So tell us a little bit about the limits. You said that originally there were 15 people that were approved, and then another 7. Each one of those, is it the same amount of growing space or plant number, or how does it determined with those 15? Did everybody get the same size growing license? And then kind of address that with the other 7 as well.
Yeah, Maryland never did any sort of canopy caps or plant caps. It was strictly number of licenses. And they did 3 different licenses: a growing license, a processing license, and a dispensing license. And the original number was 15 grower, 15 processor, and about, I think it was just under 100 dispensaries. So there were no canopy caps or plant caps associated with those licenses. And so we're not under that right now.
Jake, I wanted to go back to one thing that you were talking about, the licensing process and the turmoil that it caused. And you've got question 4 coming up now, next week on the November ballot. So from your standpoint, what's your 2 cents worth about that experience? What do we learn from that? What does that mean for you? What are you going through right now as a result of the turmoil that created?
Well, it's been 5 years of constantly trying to defend our position. I tell people all the time, I didn't select myself. It wasn't me who made those mistakes originally, right? I didn't design the application. I wasn't part of the selection process. We were selected. But unfortunately, as a first rounders, the growers that got those original licenses, suffer a lot of rhetorical wrath. We're the punching bags, for the people who are unhappy with what happened. And I think, what's going to happen with question 4 is a legalization of cannabis in Maryland. But question 4 is really an enabling question. There are 2 laws that were passed last General Assembly that decriminalize and allow everybody to grow 2 plants at home, and change some things on the criminal justice side. But question 4 does not enable the ability of the existing cannabis industry, growers, processors, and dispensaries, to sell to the general public. That they plan to do that here next session. And our legislative session here in Maryland starts in January and goes for 90 days. So there needs to be enabling legislation that happens here this winter that would turn a marketplace on. And the decriminalization starts July 1 of 2023. And, we as an industry are pushing very hard to try to have legal sales from the existing marketplace coincide with that decrim date. Because if other states are our guide, you look at New York decrimmed a couple of years ago, and right now the gray market up there is flourishing and, hurts the existing legal regulated businesses. And why that's a big deal is primarily because of testing. So the cannabis plant is an accumulator plant, which means it sucks up everything in the soil, in the water, in the environment, and deposits it into the bud. And when you consume that bud, when you smoke that bud, anything that's in that bud, the heavy metals or any contaminants, goes into your lungs. And that's very, very dangerous. And our testing here in Maryland and many other regulated states have very similar testing to Maryland. Tests for heavy metals and bacterias and salmonella and botrytis and powdery mildew, and there's limits associated with that, and there's a pass-fail that's very rigorous. And so the general public here in Maryland and across the country, should want to only buy from regulated, tested sources, not from a gray market, because who knows how that stuff is grown. And especially now that we're working on, as a country, working our way towards legalization, we should do everything possible to keep the cannabis industry, this new industry, in regulated, tested pathways and drive the criminality out of it. And also, have a safe product that consumers can buy. And that's very, very important. And we in Maryland, from a public policy standpoint, we in Maryland should not want anything that would, have a gray market stand up like what's happening in other states.
Tell us a little bit about not having a canopy cap. You have 15 of the first growers and 7 of the second set of growers, but there's no cap on the amount of canopy that you can have. How has that affected what's going on? And do you have an idea of what amount is being grown in Maryland?
Well, the state, I'm sure, has that data. Us growers don't really share that information with each other. We have a trade association that I'm chairman of, that most of the growers are a part of, but those type of that type of data is not readily shared. Some of the stuff you can't share because of antitrust stuff. But yeah, Maryland chose not to do that. Now I can tell you, moving forward into the rec world, I think that'll happen. I think we'll be under some canopy cap, regulations. And actually, I'm advocating for that. In order to diversify the marketplace even more here in Maryland, there's room, and there should be an effort to give out more licenses for growing specifically and dispensing and processing here in Maryland after we go recreational. Maryland's marketplace last year did about $500 million. All estimates are telling us that it will double or triple within the next couple of years, and that leaves more room for more people to participate. And my firm belief is that those licenses should be allocated in a legal, constitutional way, but to people of color and to people that were affected by the war on drugs. That being said, it takes 3 years minimum from the time a license is given out, to the time you're actually growing and putting stuff into the marketplace. It's a long process to do an application process, to do a selection process, and then once they're selected, to actually construct these facilities. Lead times right now in this post-COVID world of construction are years, not months anymore. So as a public policy standpoint here in Maryland, we want to turn it on as soon as possible, and the existing grower, processor, dispensary industry has the ability to absorb a significant portion of the recreational market, but not all of it. And so what I'm advocating for as a pathway forward is not grandfather, but include all of us existing marketplace and allow us to start selling July 1, put a canopy cap on the existing growers to prevent us existing market players from gobbling up all the market share. And then in several years from now, 3 to 4 years from now, once new people have been given licenses and are up and operational, then the state can reevaluate and see, what the market is, the supply and demand, and then, give the ability for everybody to expand and let the free market, do its thing.
So, Jake, looking forward at, put yourself in Steve's shoes. And Steve, you can be helpful to hear from you a little bit about what the hot buttons, are for the legislators down there too. I think social equity is one of the big questions, which Jake has touched on. License caps, so all those license issues are central questions. From your standpoint, Jake, if you're starting from scratch, what would you do?
Well, first of all, raise double the amount of money that you think you need. This business is very capital intensive. It also takes a year to even be close to being cash flow positive, because crop takes a while to grow and get started, and you're going to have some hiccups. So yeah, that's my first thing. If you're in the business side, raise more money than you think. On the regulation side, the law side, social equity is a big part of the business. In to do it right. The war on drugs has disproportionately hurt Black and brown communities more than white communities, and we need to, this business, should be equitable in how they give out licenses. At the same time, we want to drive criminality out of the product. That, to me, is our number one policy goal, is to drive criminality out of the product. And how do we do that? We do that by making it widely available, by making it reasonably priced, and that tax rates have a big deal to do with that. The lower the tax rate, the cheaper the price can be at retail, and then you drive out the black market. I'm a little young to talk about it, but my history books tell me that during the 20s of Prohibition, the criminality around alcohol sales was very violent, and now we don't even think about that anymore. They make TV shows and we laugh about guys in the backwoods of Kentucky distilling alcohol, right? Because there is no criminality associated with the production and distribution of alcohol. And to me, that should be our ultimate policy goal, as Marylanders, as Virginians, and ultimately as United States, is drive the criminality out of this product. And so to me, you do that as soon as, by pushing the legal market as soon as possible with low taxes, but also making it very, very safe. And that safeness is about testing and regulations. That would be my biggest, advocacy is the safeness and the reasonable cost, and and trying to find social equity ways to give communities of color a chance to be successful.
And that's a perfect segue into what we had planned on talking about next, is just the taxation. From my standpoint in Virginia, and we're trying to affect public policy, is where the taxes are paid, for one thing. Are they paid at the retail level, at the wholesale level, at the growing level, combination of each? So if you can just kind of tell us what your thoughts are and where you think Maryland's going from a tax rate, because getting the criminality out of it, it's a huge part of it. And we've seen some states that have not really done a good job with this, and the gray market has just flourished. And I'm afraid that's what's happening in Virginia right now. So if you can just kind of expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Here in Maryland, we don't tax medical products, services, supplies. So Maryland didn't tax, medical cannabis, right? It was considered medical here. So at the dispensary level, there is no sales tax. There is no, any excise tax, any of that kind of stuff. So what I'm advocating for here in Maryland, and it seems to be, very well received, is the product is the same. What we grow in the greenhouse, the flower buds, the pre-roll joints, the vape pens we make, we treat those products the same. It doesn't matter if it's a recreational product or a medical product at the end of the day, or how somebody's consuming it. From a production standpoint, it is all the same. We don't bifurcate the market. And what that does is it creates a very simplified, supply chain on the wholesale side. And then we sell that to the dispensary, and at the dispensary level, the product then gets differentiated at the register. So the consumer, pulls out their medical card and says, all right, I'm a medical patient. Oh, okay, we'll sell this, this eighth of flour or this vape pen to you, and there's no tax. And then if they're not a medical patient, obviously, I'm a recreational patient. Oh, okay, well, here's the sales tax. And the tax, there's quite a few different ideas on the tax. There's one train of thought that says it should just be our 6% sales tax, just like every other product that's out there. There's also obviously a train of thought that says we should make it 10 or 15 or 20% and pay for a bunch of social programs that we would like to fund. So I think somewhere in the middle is probably the right number, 6 to 10%, only because there is a desire to, we tax, the sin taxes of tobacco and alcohol. We're trying to move cannabis into that realm where we can fund some things that are good for society with this product. But at the same time, the criminality, keeping that criminality and driving that out of the product is important. And we don't want people to keep buying from their street dealer because it's cheaper than walking into a regulated store. And there's a balancing act there. And so what I've advocated here in Maryland is a phased-in approach. A very minimal tax for the first year or two, and then have an escalator to the tax because that would hopefully drive the criminality out of it from the economic standpoint, and then the state can gradually phase in the tax collection after people get accustomed to going into these regulated stores rather than their alleyway dealer.
Well, that's great. Virginia is the fourth largest illicit market in the United States, which is a little bit surprising to me. So that's a big concern, Steve, I know, for you and the people you're talking to.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And that part of the reason we're doing this show is to find out things like that. And this is the first time I've really heard of somebody that's advocating for doing the lower tax rate to begin with, and then kind of escalating it up as we've got rid of that gray market, so to speak. So I think that's probably a really good idea. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to figure out how to address in Virginia. This next session, as people may or may not know, we have a part-time General Assembly, so we just have January and February where they're in session. So it's going to be a lot of work for those of us who are trying to get this through. So the next thing is just, we're kind of transitioning into the politics now. Can you tell us, in Maryland with the Republicans and the Democrats, is there a big chasm between the two? Because in Virginia, we're having some issues getting them anywhere close to agreeing between the social equity and taxation and things like that. So kind of tell us a little bit about what's going on in Maryland from a political standpoint.
Well, Maryland is deep blue. The Democrats have held the House and the Senate in a supermajority for as long as I've known. We've had Larry Hogan, a moderate Republican, in the governor's house, for the last 8 years. But Wes Moore looks like he's going to win here in a couple of weeks handily. And Wes is, a Democrat, obviously. So all the levers of government will be in one party. I don't think there's any disagreement on getting this to the finish line. Where the disagreement is in the more progressive parts of the Democratic Party on how hard to push the social equity side. There has been, some chatter, about, delaying the start of recreational sales until new players are up and operational. But the reality is that would be years away. And then you run the risk of a gray market obviously taking hold. And just look at New York, for that, for how that works out. So, as far as Virginia, where you're much more of a 50-50 state there, Yeah, that's a challenge. Politically, I think, economically, you could probably make the the arguments that, hey, all my neighbor states are doing this, right? At least to the north, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. Specifically on the Republican side, from a business side, if you're looking at it from that lens, you're missing out on revenue. You're missing out on business job creation, and you're allowing an illegal market to continue. You said, John, Virginia is the fourth largest, illegal market in the country, and let's call it what it is. That illegal market has been around for a long time. And it's all West Coast products. All that cannabis that's grown out in the West that they can't sell is put on a truck and trucked to the East where the people are, and it's sold on the street corners. And that's not a good public policy, place to be. With the country is moving towards legalization of this product completely. Canada has done it, obviously. The Biden administration just announced some changes and some studies going on with descheduling and decriminalization. I think we're one presidential election cycle away from the country taking a different position on cannabis. I think it needs to be done at the presidential level. It needs to be a platform item for a candidate, and then they win, and then they have the political willpower to get it done. But some of these things that we're all debating in these, even in Maryland and Virginia, licensing, all these things, the minute we have a federal legalization event, however that looks like, some of these things don't matter anymore, right? Because then the Commerce Clause takes over, and there's federal rules around interstate commerce, and then SunMed can ship product to Virginia, right? And Virginia is behind the eight ball and doesn't have any local companies that have, gotten a start to participate in that. And now you're just an importer of this product that people are consuming instead of a producer. So
that leads us into the next thing. Let's talk about the regulation a little bit. And the enforcement of, I guess, not only from the business standpoint of coming in and checking you when it's growing, and from a business aspect, but then also at a consumer level. Friday afternoon, I'm from Martinsville, Virginia originally, and the races are going on. Even though it's illegal to sell it in Virginia, there are big UPS-looking trucks with marijuana leaves painted on the outside of it, and they're selling it at the racetrack, despite the fact that it's still illegal in Virginia. So, tell us a little bit about how this is policed in Maryland, and how you think is the best way to do it going forward.
Yeah, there's a perfect example of what a gray market looks like. People want to buy this product and consume it. And that same story you hear up in Central Park, New York, right? Food trucks that have converted from food to cannabis. I think what we've gotten to a point now in our society is that once decriminalization happens, any sort of decriminalization that happens, the police say, all right, we're not enforcing this rule anymore. And it's not in favor anymore in the public eye to even enforce cannabis possession laws, even if they are there. Maryland decriminalized, they have a certain amount, 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces or something like that. But the cops aren't going to walk around with a scale and say, oh, you have 4 ounces? All right, I'm throwing you in jail, right? Oh, you have 1.4 ounces? All right, now you're legal. You can keep walking. I think as a society, we have to just come to realization that people want to buy and consume this product. And they've been doing it for a very long time. And we would be better off as a society to take it out of the stream of criminal commerce and put it into normal streams of production and regulation and testing and distribution. And I mean, we have one of the largest facilities here in Maryland, maybe even the East Coast. And I'm not a consumer of cannabis. I drink beer. And but we have a team here of 130 employees. Many people here do consume cannabis. So, but you don't need to consume cannabis to run a successful cannabis business. That's my point I'm trying to make. What we have is a very, robust team here and people that are, dialed in to make safe products. This is, at the end of the day, once you get past the novelty of it, this is a consumer packaged good agricultural product. And agricultural products, just like corn and wheat and beans, are a commodity, and the price will ebb and flow with the supply and demand of that commodity. And on the retail end, it's a consumer packaged good. And, that what that means is as producers, we have to present it and offer it in a very in a consistent, professional way that people are accustomed to buying things. When you walk through a grocery store, you're accustomed to looking at and buying and purchasing items that you will consume in a way, that is, that's, in the 21st century. But you're also accustomed to it to be the same. If I'm buying, a soda or a Budweiser beer, for instance, in Maryland or in California, it should taste the same, and it should be held to the same quality standards. And that's one of our mottos here at SunMed is we consider ourselves to be the Budweiser brand. We're growing a lot of it. We do it with good quality, and then we do it with very reasonable prices. And we want to be readily available everywhere. There are other brands in our market space that are the top shelf hand trim brands, but there's only so many Grey Gooses that can be sold in a liquor store. And I like Grey Goose when I buy vodka, but not everyone wants to spend that much. And there's a whole lot of people that buy Budweiser every week and save Grey Goose for a special occasion. So anyway, that's my take on how to do this business is that Budweiser model. But there's a lot of different ways to do this.
Well, Jake, that's terrific. And it's a great note to end on. Really would like to thank Jake Van Wingerden of SunMed Growers for being with us. There'll be more information about Jake available. And I would particularly like to thank my co-host and sponsor, Steve Mize, president of Golden Piedmonts LLC. Steve, thank you as always for being here and driving the conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. It was very informative, so I enjoyed it. Nice to see you, Jake. And thanks, John.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.